From a hospital bed, I rang my parents 8 separate times while doctors were still trying to keep my lungs on speaking terms with oxygen, which suddenly seemed optimistic. My mother ignored every call because my sister was waiting for help dragging a sectional into the house I had helped her buy. A clot sat inside my lung while I lay there, oxygen tubing under my nose. Watching my phone proved that the people who raised me were busy carrying furniture 18 minutes away. I ran a business built around showing up for people when they were helpless. It took my own helplessness to learn who would show up for me. So I stopped calling my parents and called my attorney. By the time my family finally came through that hospital door, the price of leaving me alone had already been signed, witnessed, and filed. My name is Natalie Brooks. I was 38 then, and I owned a home support agency outside Columbus, Ohio. We sent aides to sit with older patients, wash their hair, cook their food, drive them to appointments, and do all the ordinary human things families claim they would do until life gets inconvenient. I had built that agency from one client, one dented SUV, and a phone that rang at all hours into a company with 46 caregivers. Every day, I made sure frightened people did not have to be alone. The joke, naturally, because the universe has no taste, was that I never imagined my own family would abandon me the first time I became the person in the bed. For almost 3 weeks before it happened, my body had been sending warnings. I got winded walking from the parking lot to my office. My right calf throbbed in a deep, stubborn way I blamed on a long drive to a client review. I blamed exhaustion, too much work, dehydration, every harmless explanation first. Eventually, responsibility won and I went to my doctor. She pressed gently along my leg, frowned, and used the words possible clot. She scheduled tests and warned me plainly. Chest pain, breathing trouble, or a sudden change meant I needed immediate help. I said I understood. Then I returned to the office because I had been cast as the dependable one, and dependable people are apparently required to treat their own bodies like badly maintained company equipment. That phrase, the dependable one, had shaped my life for as long as I could remember. My mother, Diane Brooks, said it first when I was a kid. She said it when I packed my own lunch, when I got good grades without being asked, when I calmed my younger siblings during her fights with my father. I wore the label like a prize for decades before I realized it had never really been praise. It was a family policy. It meant everyone could lean on me without checking whether I was cracking. What my family rarely said aloud, though they all benefited from it, was that I was the financial support beam. Not in a flashy, dramatic way. I did not buy sports cars or hand out envelopes at holidays. I quietly made problems disappear. I paid most of my parents' monthly costs at a comfortable retirement residence, the one my mother described to her church friends as if she and my father had chosen it through their own careful planning. I had made them the main recipients on a major life insurance policy large enough to change their lives if mine ended. And only 2 weeks before the hospital, I had agreed to provide the closing funds for my sister Lauren Carter's new house, the place she and her husband Mark Carter could not quite afford, but had already started talking about as if it were destiny. I did those things because I could. I told myself gratitude was not the point. I told myself family meant helping before being asked. And if usefulness felt enough like love, well, I never inspected that too closely. Humans are gifted at confusing a receipt for affection. I was no exception. 6 days before I collapsed, I spoke with my mother. I mentioned as casually as I could that the doctor wanted more tests and that my breathing had been strange. She passed over it like a car passing a mailbox. "You're our sturdy girl, Natalie," she said. "You always bounce back." She meant it warmly. That was the trick. She always sounded loving when she dismissed me. I had heard some version of that kind of sentence all my life and taken it as reassurance. It took a monitor beside my bed to translate it correctly. It meant my needs were not emergencies. It meant she had decided in advance that I would be fine because that was easier than responding if I wasn't. The collapse happened on a Tuesday morning in my office. I was standing beside the staff schedule, coffee in one hand, trying to cover a weekend shift for a client with dementia whose daughter was flying in late. The room did not spin exactly. It narrowed. The air thickened as if someone had filled the hallway with wet wool. I tried to inhale and nothing came in properly. Then pain struck my chest, sharp and bright, and my coffee mug slipped from my hand. It broke across the floor with a sound that seemed to arrive from another room. My operations manager, Vanessa Cole, had worked beside me since the ugly SUV days. Vanessa did not panic. She looked at my face once, said my name, and called emergency services before I had finished sliding down beside the file cabinet. I can still remember cold tile against my palm. I remember Vanessa giving the dispatcher my age, my symptoms, and my doctor's warning. Even then, absurdly, I remember thinking she was handling the call well. Apparently my training had stuck. Leave it to me to review staff performance while possibly dying on commercial flooring. The paramedics arrived fast. Someone put a mask over my face. A man with gentle eyes told me to squeeze his hand. I tried to answer him and had no air for words. They lifted me onto a stretcher, rolled me past my own employees, and got me into the ambulance. During the ride, through the siren and the floating terror of not getting enough oxygen, one clean thought cut through everything. I might die today. Me. The reliable one. The one who signed checks and remembered birthdays and fixed other people's emergencies. I could die on a Tuesday before lunch, and the last thing I had done was arrange care for someone else's mother. The emergency department moved with the grim efficiency of people who know waiting is dangerous. Scans, blood draws, an IV, voices above me. By late morning, they had placed me in intensive care. A doctor named Angela Price stood near the end of the bed and told me what was happening because I asked her not to soften it. A pulmonary embolism. A large clot had formed in my leg, come loose and moved into my lung. She said the first 48 hours mattered most. Medication was already going in to keep the clot from getting larger and to protect my heart and lungs while they watched the next steps. She said many people recovered. She also said some did not. Then she told me I should call my family. Call my family. I lay under the white blanket with the oxygen line whispering beneath my nose while a monitor announcing every heartbeat like it was reading minutes from a meeting. I felt alone in a way I had never felt before. Not because no one existed. Because the people who should have rushed in were close enough to arrive quickly, and I wondered for the first time whether they would bother. I grabbed for my phone. My hand shook hard enough that it took 2 tries to unlock the screen. I accused myself of making it bigger than it was. My mother would answer, hear the word ICU, and come immediately. She would fuss, complain that I had scared her, and ask a nurse too many questions. I pressed her name. It rang until voicemail. Her recorded greeting was bright and familiar, promising she would call right back. I left a message as steadily as my lungs allowed. Mom, it's Natalie. I'm in intensive care at Mercy Ridge. There's a serious clot in my lung. Call me as soon as you hear this. I ended the call and looked up at the ceiling tiles. Maybe she was driving. Maybe she had dropped her phone into her purse. Maybe she was in the shower. I gave it 12 minutes according to the wall clock because apparently even fear can become administrative. After that, I dialed my father, Richard Brooks. 4 rings, voicemail. I recorded the same warning for him, thinner this time. Then I waited. I knew Lauren was moving that day. I also knew my parents had agreed with Lauren they would spend the day hauling boxes and furniture into the new place. The new place my money was making possible. But even in my family, I assumed there was a line. Surely a blood-lung clot in your daughter outranked a sectional. Surely intensive care beat a moving day. Surely one of the humans who made me would look at a phone and decide I mattered more than a piece of furniture with cup holders. During the following 2 hours, I dialed 6 more times. 4 for my mother, 2 for my father. Each one rang out. After the 5th unanswered attempt, I quit recording voicemails because I had run out of useful words. Still in ICU, still possibly dying, still your daughter felt redundant. Then I opened the family group chat because pain apparently enjoys upgrades. There they were. Active, posting. My mother had shared a photo of Lauren's living room stacked with boxes. Another showed my father flushed and smiling while holding one end of the sectional. Lauren had sent a row of laughing faces. Mark had posted a picture of pizza boxes on the kitchen counter. My mother's message read, "Huge day for our sweet girl and her beautiful first home." Our sweet girl. I read it twice. My oxygen line tugged against my cheek as I turned my face away from the phone. I had spent years making myself small enough not to disturb them, and even from an ICU bed, I was still waiting politely for a turn that would never come. My phone buzzed once that afternoon. My heart jumped before I could stop it. It was not my mother. It was Lauren. She had clearly seen something, maybe one of my messages, maybe a missed call, maybe enough information to understand that I was not at home with a cold and a flair for drama. This was the text my sister sent while I was being monitored for a life-threatening clot. "Crazy moving day here, but glad the hospital has you covered. Rest and we'll catch up later." Glad the hospital has you covered. As if I had booked a weekend package. As if nurses adjusting medication and watching my oxygen levels were the same as room service. I read the words until they stopped looking like language. I waited for another message. Something like, "Wait, I see you. How bad is it? I'm coming." Nothing came. Lauren had decided my emergency was handled because professionals were present. Her boxes still needed attention. Her house still needed arranging. My body could be left to strangers, which, in fairness, was the family model with better uniforms. I did not answer. No useful words were left for someone who thought a quick text could stand in for showing up. Instead, I set the phone aside and started thinking about the names attached to my life. The beneficiaries, the estate documents, the monthly payments, the promised house money. All the quiet wiring behind a family that had just shown me exactly where I stood when the lights went out. There was one person I had not called yet, my younger brother Adam Brooks. Adam was 31, the youngest, a middle school industrial arts teacher in a town about half an hour away. He had never quite fit the family system. He was not Lauren, the cherished one. He was not me, the workhorse. He was just kind in a way that did not need applause. I almost did not call him. I kept telling myself he was teaching. I told myself I should not scare him. I told myself all the old nonsense that trained, useful daughters used to keep from needing anything. Then I tapped Adam Brooks. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie," I barely got the words out. "I'm in the hospital, ICU, clot in my lung." He did not ask if it might wait. He did not ask if anyone else was coming. He said, "Which hospital?" I told him. "I'm on my way," he said, and ended the call before I could argue. 36 minutes later, Adam walked into my room still wearing his work boots, wood dust on his jeans and his face drained of color. He came directly to my bedside and wrapped both hands around mine. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not leaving." That was when I cried, not because I was afraid of dying. I had been afraid all day and stayed dry-eyed. I cried because for 38 years I had arrived, fixed things, paid, carried, and stayed. I finally learned what it felt like when someone did it for me. It was like putting down a weight I had stopped noticing because it had become part of my bones. Adam stayed through the night. He phoned his school and arranged coverage. He slept badly in a vinyl chair that looked designed by someone with a personal grudge against spines. Whenever a nurse entered to check tubing or adjust the monitor, he woke, watched, and asked if I was okay. He did not make the room about his fear. He did not need comforting for witnessing mine. He just stayed. By the second evening, the drugs were doing their job. My oxygen numbers improved. Dr. Price said the danger was easing, though I still needed close monitoring and a long recovery. With my breathing steadier and Adam asleep beside me, I did what I had done in business for years. I reviewed the accounts honestly. My parents' residence charges leaving my account each month, the insurance policy naming them first. My will, written when I still believed duty and love were the same animal. The money set aside for Lauren's house, promised before she told me in one breezy text exactly how little my crisis interrupted her plans. 8 calls, the sectional, the pizza. "Glad the hospital has you covered." I was not furious. Fury would have been hotter. This was colder and more exact. It was a ledger correcting itself after years of bad entries. I had spent my adult life filling in my family's silence with excuses. They were busy. They were overwhelmed. They loved me but expressed it badly. They counted on me because they respected me. In 48 hours, they had answered a question I had avoided asking. Where did I rank once I had nothing to give? Below moving day. Below furniture. Below the comfort of pretending I never needed care. I watched Adam asleep, folded awkwardly in that awful chair, one hand still resting near the rail of my bed, and understood the simplest thing in the world. I had been pouring everything into people who did not come and stepping past the one person who came. That ended now. Morning made the decision almost insultingly easy. My phone flashed with another group chat update. My mother had posted a photo of Lauren's kitchen, unpacked and spotless. First breakfast in the new house, so proud, so thankful. I scrolled back through the thread. 2 days of pictures, jokes, boxes, furniture, grandchildren, pizza, and kitchen cabinets. Not a single mention of me. Not once had my name appeared while I was in intensive care less than 20 minutes away. My mother had documented countertop clutter but not asked if her oldest child was still breathing. I placed the phone on the blanket. No wave of rage came. I felt calm, almost clean. They had shown me what my life meant to them when it stopped being useful, so I would make my paperwork match reality. That was not revenge. It was bookkeeping. I phoned my lawyer. Marcus Bennett had represented me since the 3rd year of my business. He had drafted contracts, reviewed leases, talked me out of 2 bad vendor agreements, and handled my estate plan 4 years earlier. He was careful, decent, and annoyingly fond of asking the question you least wanted but most needed. So when I told him what I wanted, he stayed quiet for a few seconds. I gave him the location, then described the embolism, the ICU, the 8 unanswered calls, the group chat, the sectional, and the house money. Then I said I needed to change my life insurance beneficiaries, revise my will, end the automatic payments to my parents' residence, and withdraw the closing funds for Lauren before the transfer finalized. I wanted it done properly at the hospital as soon as legally possible. Marcus exhaled slowly. Natalie, I will do what you instruct. But I need to ask this because as your lawyer and because I care about you. Is this a decision or is it the injury speaking? Those can sound very similar in a hospital room. I respected him for asking. I would have trusted him less if he had not. This is not me lashing out, I said. This is me believing what they showed me. I've spent nearly 4 decades giving them explanations they never earned. I don't need to do that anymore. Another pause. Then his voice changed into the practical tone I knew well. I'll come today, we do this cleanly. I want your physician available to document capacity. We need witnesses, no loose edges. That was why I called him. I knew enough from estate work to understand where people attack later. Not the signatures first, but the mind behind them. They would say I was medicated, confused, frightened, manipulated by Adam, not myself. They would turn my hospital bed into a courtroom if there was even a crack to pry open. I would not provide one. Before Marcus arrived, I requested a conversation with Dr. Price. I explained what I planned and the reason for it. Then I asked directly whether she could record in my medical record that I was clear, oriented, and able to make legal and money decisions. She studied me for several seconds. It was the look of one tired, competent woman recognizing another who had reached the end of being managed. Yes, she said. Your oxygen is stable. Your labs are improving. You're lucid. In my medical judgment, you have full capacity. I'll document it. And if you need a witness, I can do that too. My nurse, Paula Grant, agreed to serve as the second witness. Paula had silver glasses on a cord, arms strong enough to move a bed by herself, and the expression of a woman who had seen too much foolishness to be impressed by any new version. I trusted her immediately. By mid-afternoon, the pieces were set. A physician confirming my capacity, a nurse witnessing my signature, an attorney making sure the documents could survive the tantrum they would inevitably produce. For the first time after the ambulance ride, I felt less like a patient and more like myself, a woman who built things carefully so they could not be knocked down by someone else's performance. Marcus laid the papers across the rolling tray table where untouched broth and gelatin had been arriving for 2 days, a bleak little buffet of mortality. He reviewed the documents with me slowly. First, the life insurance change. Diane and Richard Brooks came off as primary beneficiaries. Adam became the main beneficiary, and the rest went to a caregiver emergency fund I had talked about creating for years. A fund for aides who spent their lives caring for everyone else, and then had no cushion when their own lives cracked. Second, the revised will, sending my estate toward the same recipients. Third, the instruction ending the automatic payments to my parents' senior residence. Fourth, the withdrawal of the closing funds for Lauren Carter's house before the transfer cleared. I read every page. Marcus explained every clause. Dr. Price stood beside one rail of the bed. Paula stood on the other. I signed with a steady hand. Paula signed. Dr. Price signed. Marcus notarized what needed notarizing and packed the originals into his briefcase. There was no dramatic music, no shouting, no thunder outside the window. Only the soft scrape of ink correcting a life. When the last page was finished, I leaned back and looked at the 3 people in the room. I spent years assigning my life to people who assumed I would survive anything without them, I said. Now it's going to the people who were actually in the room. Paula nodded once, as if she had watched versions of this scene more times than anyone should have to. Marcus closed his briefcase and paused near the door. "It's done," he said. "Clean, documented, hard to challenge." Adam had gone out for coffee and came back to find, without asking for details, that the family map had been redrawn on a hospital tray table. He saw my face and did not push. Adam had always known when an explanation would only make a clear decision smaller. I made no call to my parents. I did not text Lauren. There was nothing to announce. The point was not to stage a scene. The point was that it was real now, signed and filed, whether they liked it or not. Elsewhere in town, my mother was probably admiring Lauren's new cabinets. Lauren was probably deciding where to place pillows inside a place she did not yet know had lost its foundation. I lay in the room not one of them had entered, listening to my own heart steady itself, and felt a peace so strange I almost did not recognize it. They would find out when the money stopped. People like that always discover the injury once it reaches their bank account. By Friday, I was no longer in intensive care. They had transferred me to an ordinary room. The clot had stabilized. I faced months of medication, follow-up scans, and the boring discipline of not pretending I was invincible. Adam came after school every day with decent soup, terrible magazines, and stories from his students. During those days, we talked more days than in all the previous years combined. It turned out my brother and I liked each other very much when the rest of the family system was not using us as furniture. My parents still had not called. Lauren still had not called. Their silence, which had felt like abandonment at first, began to feel like a small mercy. It gave me time to breathe before the inevitable performance. The performance began when the bank noticed. My business accountant, who had been looped in after Marcus handled the legal side, told me the withdrawal had gone through. The funds were pulled back before they reached the title company. Somewhere, a closing agent was staring at a missing wire. Somewhere, Lauren and Mark were being told that their new house, the one already full of boxes and optimism, had developed a financial hole large enough to swallow the day. I did not feel triumphant. That surprised me. I thought maybe I would feel victorious, or at least satisfied. Instead, I felt a sober calm. I had not created their dependence. I had simply stopped underwriting it. Gravity, that famously petty force, could handle the rest. Mark was the first to panic. Naturally, he called Adam, not me, because apparently even my near-death experience did not qualify me as the person to contact about my own money. Adam answered in my room and put the phone on speaker after glancing at me. Mark's voice came through tight and fast. The bank said the closing funds had not arrived. The sellers were losing patience. The closing might fail. Did Adam know anything? Was there some mix-up? Natalie had promised. Natalie always followed through. Natalie never failed. There it was again, dependable, the family prayer. The magic word they used whenever they needed me to stop being a person and become infrastructure. Adam's voice stayed flat. I don't manage Natalie's finances. You should ask Natalie. She's in the hospital in case anyone needs that reminder. A small silence followed. I could practically hear Mark remembering my illness with irritation, as if my lung clot had chosen a very inconsiderate time to interfere with their real estate plans. They still did not understand. Even after the money vanished, they were not worried about whether I was safe. They were worried about the cost of my absence. Lauren called me that evening. It was the first actual call from my sister since the morning I went down. For one foolish instant, I wondered maybe she had finally understood. Maybe Mark had told her how bad it had been. Maybe this was the apology, the trembling voice, the question no one had asked yet. Are you okay? It was not. Nat, she said, skipping hello like we were in the middle of a normal errand. Is there some issue with the house funds? The title office says the money didn't arrive, and Mark is losing his mind. Did your account freeze or something? Did your account freeze? I lay there in a hospital bed 4 days after she had reduced my ICU stay to a scheduling inconvenience and listened to my sister's concern locate itself precisely in my bank account. Something inside me detached, softly and without pain. Lauren, I said. I called Mom and Dad 8 times from intensive care. You texted me that the hospital had me covered. A pause. Then she said, genuinely confused, why are you bringing that up about the house? That sentence did more than hurt me. It informed me she truly did not see a connection. The sister who could die and the sister who could pay were, in her mind, separate accounts. Just one had ever a balance worth checking. The house is exactly part of it, I said. But I won't unpack it on a call. If you want that conversation, come to the hospital. You know where I am. You've known for 4 days. Within an hour, my mother began calling. Once, twice, then again and again. The phone that had sat silent through the most dangerous hours of my life now lit up with Diane Brooks as if I should be grateful for the delayed service. I watched her name flash and felt nothing warm. No relief, no ache, just clarity. I did not answer. It was not punishment. Speaking to my mother by phone was never an actual conversation. It was a room with no witnesses where she could rearrange facts in real time until I somehow became the person apologizing. She could turn neglect into misunderstanding, anger into concern, my pain into an attack on her. She had been practicing that trick longer than I had been alive. Not this time. If she wanted to speak, she could do it in the hospital room she had ignored, in front of the brother who came, the lawyer who filed the papers, and the documents she could not talk into disappearing. I let her calls ring out, then I turned the phone over and looked at Adam. They'll come tomorrow, I said. Should I stay here? Yes, and Marcus, I want witnesses to the weather event. Adam almost smiled. It was the first time either of us had found anything funny in days, so naturally we cherished it like rare wildlife. That night, I prepared the only way I knew how. I got facts in order. I called Marcus and asked him to bring copies of all of it. The beneficiary change, the revised will, the stopped payment instruction, the confirmation that Lauren's funds had been withdrawn, and the capacity note from Dr. Price. Not to wave around like a villain in a cheap movie. Just to have them on the tray table, silent and solid. Marcus gave me a single instruction. Don't argue, he said. Your mother will try to make it about tone, timing, disrespect, cruelty, anything but the facts. The minute you argue, truth becomes a volume contest. Let the papers do what papers do. I wrote that across the back of a cafeteria menu. Do not debate. Let the documents answer. In the dark, I rehearsed staying calm. I replayed every family fight I had ever lost, though fight was too generous a word for most of them. Usually my mother declared reality and I adjusted myself around it. I had mistaken compliance for peace. What defeated me had never been her logic. It had been my hunger for her approval. But the hunger was gone. A useful thing about being left alone when death is in the room is that some needs die before you do. I no longer needed my mother to love me correctly. That made me harder to move. Late that night, my father called. I nearly ignored it, but seeing his name on the display did not carry the same machinery as hers. I answered. "Natalie," he said. His voice sounded rough and small. "Lauren told us you were hospitalized and how serious it was." I waited. "Did you really call 8 times that first day?" "Yes," he breathed out in a broken way. "I had my phone on me, I felt it buzzing. Your mother said it was probably the delivery people or Lauren asking where something went. She said we'd check later. I did what she said. I kept carrying furniture while you were in intensive care." Then my father cried. Richard Brooks was not a dramatic man. I had seen him cry maybe once before at his brother's funeral. I let him cry this time. I did not rush to comfort him. That was new for me, but I did not punish him either. My father's failure had always been cowardice, not cruelty. There is a difference even when both hurt. "I nearly lost my daughter," he said. And there I was moving a sectional. "I will be okay," I said. "But things are different now. You need to know that before you come here." He went quiet before saying the first truly useful sentence anyone besides Adam had offered. "I know. I'm grateful you're still here to change them. I'll come in the morning, even if your mother tells me not to." They came just after 10. My mother came through the door first, because Diane Brooks treated every doorway as though it existed for her entrance. She carried a supermarket bouquet covered in plastic and wore the bright, practiced smile she used at church events and family photos. No shame showed on her face, no fear. Behind her, my father looked pale and wrecked. Lauren and Mark hovered near the door, already tense. Adam stood beside my bed. Marcus sat near the window with a folder on his lap. My mother swept in as if volume could disinfect the room. "Oh, Natalie," she said, leaning down to kiss my forehead before I could stop her. "You frightened everyone. But here you are, my strong girl. I knew you would pull through." There it was, the old spell, strong girl. She offered it as if it were a blessing, though it had functioned my whole life as a locked door. She placed the bouquet on my tray table, directly over the space where I wanted the documents. Then, with almost no space between acknowledging I was alive and reaching her real subject, she sat beside the bed and folded her purse in her lap. "Now," she said, "Lauren says there's some confusion with the house money. I'm sure this is just a bank delay, so let's fix that before everyone gets more upset." Before everyone gets more upset. I looked at my mother, who had skipped my near death and landed neatly on financing, and felt the last little tremor inside me go still. My voice stayed low. I did not perform pain for people who had ignored it when it mattered. I moved the flowers myself to the windowsill, then nodded toward Marcus. He rose and put the folder on the tray table. Then I told them. I said that on my second day in the hospital, after my calls were ignored and no one came, I had asked Marcus to meet me there. I explained that I had removed my parents as beneficiaries on my life insurance. I had revised my will. I had ended the automatic payments covering their retirement residence, payments my mother seemed to believe came from pensions, good fortune, or some charitable weather system, since she had never asked too closely. I had withdrawn the closing funds for Lauren's house before they cleared. That explained why the bank had nothing to send. I said it the way I would give numbers to a client, even, exact, without decoration. Silence dropped into the room. My mother's smile stayed on her face for one strange second after the rest of her had lost it. Then I said the sentence I had prepared. "I called you 8 times from this bed. You came after the furniture was moved, so from the bed you couldn't visit." My mother broke open at once. Not grief, not shame, anger. She rose from the chair and said I was cruel. She said I was punishing the entire family over a misunderstanding. She said she had not known it was serious. She said messages get missed on moving days. She said I should have tried harder to reach them, as if 8 calls and the phrase intensive care were subtle clues hidden in a crossword. Then came the line that explained the whole structure. You did this while sick in a hospital room. What sort of child plots against her parents while she's sick? Plots. That was the word she chose, as if changing my own documents was an ambush, as if the betrayal in the room was paperwork, not absence. I let her talk herself out. I remembered Marcus's advice. Do not argue. Let the papers speak. Marcus stood calmly and explained that the documents had all been completed correctly. The doctor had recorded that I had full decision-making capacity. The signatures were witnessed. The relevant forms were notarized and filed. The beneficiary changes were valid. The payment instruction had been processed. The withdrawal was complete. There were no obvious grounds to challenge anything. Paula, who had entered to inspect my IV and lingered by the door because nurses have a sixth sense for family disasters, added, "I witnessed the signing." She was clear, alert, and very sure. My mother looked at Marcus, then at Paula, then at the folder. I saw comprehension finally hit her that this was not a phone call she could dominate. There was no soft place to push, no confusion to exploit, no daughter still desperate enough to fold. I looked at her and said, quietly, "You kept calling me strong so you never had to show up. I had enough strength left to stop paying for being ignored." Lauren had been frozen near the door. Now the meaning finally reached her. Her house, the place with its neat kitchen and half-empty boxes, had not been secured by love or fate or family enthusiasm. It had been secured by my money, and my money had left when she did not come. "You're stealing my house," she whispered. For the first time, I felt something close to pity, not enough to change my mind, just enough to see the damage clearly. Lauren had been trained too, in her own way. She had learned to expect help to appear whenever she needed it, and that I existed somewhere behind the curtain pulling levers. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm no longer paying for it. Those are different things, even if no one taught us the difference." Mark kept quiet. For a man who had plenty of voice when calling Adam, he had suddenly discovered the healing power of silence. Tiny mercies, apparently, do exist. I looked back at Lauren. "You called when the money disappeared. Not when I almost died." She had nothing to say. No one did. The monitor kept marking my heartbeat, steady, present, the sound they had not come to hear when it might have ended. My father sat in the corner covering his face with both hands. Adam's hand rested against my shoulder. For the first time I could remember, surrounded by my family, I did not apologize for making them uncomfortable with the truth. I did not cut my parents off completely. That would have made a cleaner story, maybe even a more satisfying one. But real life is usually less cinematic and more irritatingly complicated. I did not want revenge badly enough to become careless with two aging people, one guilty and one weak. So I told them the only route I would even consider. The insurance and will would not change back. Those decisions were final. Adam and the caregiver fund would remain where I had placed them. Lauren's house money was gone. She and Mark would have to find a home they could afford without using my account as a personality trait. But I would consider restoring part of the monthly support for my parents' residence only if the conditions were written down. Marcus took notes as I spoke. The first condition was that they acknowledge plainly, without excuses, that they left me by myself in intensive care after I told them I might be in danger. Second, if we were going to have any version of family after this, care had to travel in both directions. I would no longer be the support column for a house where I was treated like a utility line. If they wanted me as a daughter, they needed to act like parents when there was nothing convenient or profitable about it. My father signed the written acknowledgement before my mother finished objecting. His hand shook. That night he kept watch from the ugly chair beside Adam, two men watching over someone they had almost lost. My mother took longer. She waited by the window, arms folded while the room waited. For once, no one filled the silence for her. No one rescued her from the weight of her own behavior. At last, not quite meeting my eyes, she said, "I should have come." Those 3 words, too small for a lifetime of damage, but honest enough to stand. Lauren and Mark left before lunch. Their closing fell through the next day. A few months later, they bought a smaller place with money they actually had, which is less glamorous but has the underrated benefit of being real. I went home on blood thinners, follow-up appointments, and a life that no longer pointed toward people who only noticed me when the transfer failed. My will stayed rewritten. Adam stayed close. The caregiver fund opened before the end of that year. And when I think back to that hospital room, I do not remember my mother's flowers or Lauren's panic first. I remember Adam's hand on mine, Paula by the door, Marcus's folder on the tray table, and my own signature moving steadily across the page. I had called 8 times from a bed they refused to visit. So from that same bed, I finally stopped paying for their absence.